One of the things I love best in music, well, actually, many other things than music too, is when that moment happens when your defensive walls of prejudice come crashing down and you get something you haven't got before. Maybe you've dismissed it, maybe you've been rude about it, maybe it's even a kind of pet hate. But I can tell you, pet hates are always worth letting go of, always. And because you just open a door to more experience. And that's what happened about 15 years ago with me and Giuseppe Verdi. I didn't get his music. I didn't get it at all. I think I have a bit of a problem, I'll confess, with Italian opera, generally speaking. It's not quite me. And yet, I remember being asked to do a program on Verdi, the series Discovering Music I used to do. I remember thinking, far too many intelligent, decent musical people I know like Verdi, so it does look as if the problem isn't his, it's mine. Shall we approach this and see if we can find out what it is? And I actually began to discover that it really was my prejudice. And one thing that I realized, it was about the same time as I really started to get Italian cooking. And if that sounds like a strange comparison, I'll develop it a bit. You see, I remember a cook saying to me, a chef used to say to me years ago, if French food is a hymn of praise to the chef, Italian food is a hymn of praise to the ingredients. And it was when I started going to Italy for holidays, and I realized that the best Italian food is often very, very simple. Sometimes so simple that it's astonishing, like spaghetti and a bit of oil and some garlic, that's all. And yet you do it so well that it just brings out all the qualities of the food itself. And it's the same with Verdi. He started in a tradition with composers like Rossini, Bellini, Donizetti, which to somebody like me who really loved complicated and intense German and Russian music, it all looked a bit too simple for me. You get incredibly simple accompaniments most of the time. I had a friend in the English National Opera Orchestra who played second violin who said they used to dread playing Donizetti. It's a whole evening of going, or while on the stage, all the interest is in the vocal writing. Verdi grew out of that tradition. It was the only tradition he really knew at first. But it's interesting that even compared to such good composers as Bellini and Donizetti, there's something about his tunes right from the start that they're just really quality. He knew how to create what the Germans called an earworm. He was brilliant at that. But the other thing that he had, which was truly astonishing, that I don't think any of the composers in the Italian school before had to such an extent, was an understanding of dramatic pace, how to keep the action going. Because in opera, you can get that kind of stop-start quality, don't you? You know, a bit of action happens and then suddenly stop, and the soprano sings an aria about, ah, me, my heart is troubled, or whatever else, he doesn't love me. And then it's back to the action again. Verdi was brilliant at keeping both going while making sure that the voice lovers got lots of beautiful vocal display at the same time. But as he developed, and as his understanding of his basic compositional ingredients increased, then his use of them became subtler and richer. And you're starting to see that happening in some of the music in this concert. We start, for instance, with the Overture to Nabucco. This is really pretty simple in many ways, but by God, it's exciting. It really sets the stage, doesn't it, for the opera. And then comes Va Pensiero, the song, sometimes known as the chorus of the Hebrew slaves, tells the story of the Israelites in slavery in Babylon at a time when they'd been taken into captivity. And this song, it's a kind of unofficial Italian anthem. And I was absolutely fascinated that during lockdown, hundreds of people recorded it, did Zoom versions of it. It was an incredibly beautiful Zoom version of almost an entire village all getting together to sing this song, even though they were all locked down in their houses. And there was something about the message of oppression, of trappedness, but at the same time of hope, which really sustained people. Then we have marvelous operas, like extracts from marvelous operas like La Traviata or Il Trovatore, the Troubadour. And these are where we come across the absolute gems of Verdi's fantastic ability to write tunes, which are on the one level very, very singable, at the same time are character studies. They tell you things about the character who's singing at the same time as giving you something just to enjoy. There are so many levels on which you can appreciate this music. And La Traviata is a fascinating example of how psychologically subtle Verdi was too, because the heroine, Violetta, she's a woman of, well, we would say of pleasure, but it is, of course, in that old patrician world, largely for the pleasure of the men. However, there's a lot of music in the first part of the opera which suggests, oh, everybody having a good time partying, but how wonderfully Verdi manages to suggest that there's something really empty and desolate and sad behind all this. And that, of course, is what blossoms as we hear the music developing in La Traviata. Trovatore is, well, it brings us to the essence of opera, which in the end is love and death, and how intimately they're connected they are. And of course, it's an opera that ends with people being executed, taking poison, killing themselves in all sorts of ways in prison. Classic situation. Real melodrama, which if you saw it enacted as a play on the stage, you'd probably think, well, yeah, okay, that stuff's a bit faded. But when you hear it brought to life with Verdi's music, somehow or other, these improbable, sometimes even ludicrous plots really come to life. Then we have something from an opera with the most perfect Verdian title, La Forza del Destino, the force of destiny or of fate. And that is what you can hear in the music right from the start. That sense of dramatic impetus that Verdi created so well, it's now embodying the principle of fate, cruel fate, working its way out. And also we have something from the great opera Aida that Verdi wrote to celebrate the opening of the Suez Canal. It's actually set in Egypt. But again, prison scenes, death, love, tragically unfulfilled, mistaken identity, it's all there and set forth in the most wonderful tunes. The thing is, I think ultimately Verdi is a lesson to us all about how, well, simplicity and sophistication aren't quite so easy to tell apart as we might think. Verdi seems to be very simple sometimes. The material he uses often is very direct. The orchestral accompaniments are not very complicated and rich and complexly layered as, say, Wagner's are, but he really, really uses them well. He's not just a great tunesmith. He's not just a great sort of theatrical master. He doesn't just have that sense of the momentum that keeps a plot going and which can stay through an aria. He's also a great psychologist too. And it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, Wagner is also, you could say, all of those things. Yet with Wagner, the intellectuality of it, the psychoanalytic element is much more obvious. And Wagner's sophistication and cleverness is immediately apparent. In fact, it's the kind of thing that puts some people off. But Verdi, he has this extraordinary ability to deliver complex, fascinating messages in the most simple, accessible tones. And of course, he's such a great melodist.